Denmark is an excellent place to raise children. You have a relaxed work culture that encourages work-life balance. You have generous parental leave for both women and men. You have free healthcare, and at the same time, there's a multitude of green spaces and playgrounds in all the big cities. So there's no doubt when you see Denmark as one of the top 5 or top 10 places to raise children around the world. But there's one more thing that flies under the radar, and that is that in Denmark it's cheap, relatively speaking, to raise children. But how much so? In today's video, I'll tell you exactly how much it costs to raise a child for the first 2 years here in Denmark. I have tracked every single expense for my son's first 2 years, and I'm gonna share that with you. So in case you're planning to have a kid or build a family here, you'll get perspective on what are the biggest expenses, how much you should be planning for. Just note, these are the numbers for one child for 2 years. That's how old my son is, so I'm gonna update the video when he gets 5 and so on. But in the meantime, this is for just the first 2 years. And also it's just for one child. If you have multiple children, you probably have some economies of scale here, but so far we only have one. And before you think I'm a freak, I have tracked all my personal costs for the last 12 years. I have run personal budgets for as long, so I know exactly how much I'm spending my money. So it's not that I'm trying to micromanage my son's cost. It just happens that I have the data and I want to share that with you. So as you can see here, the grand total of how much we spent on our son the first 2 years is 100,918 Danish krona. And this is divided into 4 periods, you can see here. So before birth, we spent 14,000-ish. Then in 2019, we spent around 10,000. Over 2020 for the full year, 55,800. And then over 2021, we spent 20,588. Ciao. Just to clarify, my son was born at the end of May 2019. So that means that we have 7 months of data for 2019 and 5 months of data for 2021. So we had a full spectrum of, okay, these are the exact 2 years, how much it cost. Now, 2 quick disclaimers on this. The first one is that, as you can see here, 100,000 is including the child credit. In Denmark, we have very generous child credit from the state. So when you have children, and I think it applies for almost everyone, unless you're very rich or you earn like a lot of money, you get a child credit from the state. And I'm gonna go exactly on how much it is in a second. But what you need to know is that over these 2 years, we have received around 47,000 from this child credit. And because you get basically like money you get in your pocket, I say, okay, I remove that from the cost. So if I would keep that in the cost and would just say, okay, how much did we actually have to pay up from our pocket specifically for the child and not count the child credit, the total cost was 147,662. So this 10,000 is a bit artificially low, but again, at the end of the day, this is how much it changed in our budget because we get this money for free from the state. This includes absolutely everything. The only thing I would say that it's a bit grayish and it's not like fully included, you could say, is that we traveled a lot, especially in 2019. And there are no travel costs directly linked to the child. Yes, for example, when we bought the travel stroller, that's included here. But for example, we went to a bit fancier hotels because we had a child and we didn't want to go to a hostel, for example. But there was no way for us to quantify as a family that as a children cost and not as a us traveling cost. Because again, for the first 2 years, the children don't have to pay for flights. They can travel for free on the planes. And even though we went to New Zealand and to the Caribbean and so on, by and large, he didn't really cost us a lot of money, especially since at that time we were traveling, he was exclusively breastfeeding, so we didn't even have to worry for food for him. So, all right, let's move on. And what you can see here are how are the main categories of costs for these first 2 years. We have one-off cost for 71,000 in total. So the next section of the video, I'll explain in detail what are these one-off costs, so you can actually see, okay, where do you actually spend the money. But a one-off cost means it's something that you buy for once and then you don't have to pay it recurrently every month. So for example, when you buy a stroller, you hopefully don't buy a stroller every month, right? So that's a one-off cost. Same, for example, if you need to take a taxi ride or if you're going to sign up for some like swimming lessons, for example. The second biggest cost was vuggestue. And vuggestue is the daycare for kids in Denmark, which is around 4,000 krona per month, depends on commune. So for example, the Copenhagen commune is around 4,000. Then most communes will be more or less the same, but it's not exactly the same for each commune. And what you need to know is that, again, in the same way that you get a child credit, you also get a subsidy for the vuggestue. And also if you send your children to the dagpleje, maybe you have to pay something like around 12,000 or something like that instead of 4,000. But you get the money back from the state. So like this number is artificially low, but again, it's because you get a subsidy from the state. And at the end of the day, in your budget, this is the number that you will see as a cost. Next up is babysitter. We didn't use babysitter so much the first year because my wife was on parental leave and then I was on parental leave, but we did a lot more here in 2021. So this number could be higher depending on the case. And also we had Corona in the middle, so we couldn't do a lot of, getting a lot of contact with other people, especially in some of the periods. And then we have food, for example. These are like budgeted, especially for 2020, 2021 food. I would say, okay, this is exclusively for him. And by and large, it's hard to separate that from another cost, but that's what we have here. And then, as I said, we have the child credit, which basically takes all these costs and lowers them down. So in total, then we have 100,919 Danish krona. So that's per category. Now, when it comes to the one-offs, so this is interesting. So these are biggest categories only. So these are not all the one-off costs. As I said, the one-off costs would sum up to around 71,000, and what we have here is 50,000, 50 something thousand. So there's a lot more things missing. And even though I'm kind of a thorough guy and noticing my costs, it could be that I'm missing a little bit here and a little bit there. But by and large, I would say that at least as an indication, this could give you a good data, right? So clothes, this is the biggest one-off expense so far for us in these first 2 years. We spent around 15,000 Danish krona on clothes. I would even say it's a bit more. And a tip on this is that we did, or my wife especially, she did a lot of the second-hand materials as well for clothes and so on, for especially jackets and so on, that you can get in the flea markets, and you can also get it online or via Facebook, and you can get really nice quality stuff for almost nothing. So again, like that's how we have saved a little bit on clothes, but it's not that you need to. I mean, it's just up to you. Then strollers, and I say strollers with S because when you have children, you have normally one main stroller, and we got the Bugaboo Fox in case you're curious, and we really like the stroller. It has been that, and we still use it now. It's an absolute amazing stroller. And then for traveling, we also got a yo-yo stroller, which if you have not heard about it and you're planning to have kids, you need one of those yo-yo travel strollers. I'm gonna show some kind of video on top of this, and you see how like it just packs. It's amazingly valuable and amazingly useful. It's basically the biggest life hack when you have a kid and want to travel. And yeah, we spent 11,600 on strollers. You can also get them secondhand and probably get a good deal, but again, you're gonna use them so much that make sure you get something you like. Then stuff for home, and when it says stuff for home, it's like crib, bed, chair for the children, plates, and so on. I'm actually surprised it's quite high, right? But again, it's like a lot of the things that you need to do for example, baby-proof your house and so on. Diapers, and this number might be a bit lower than it should be, because sometimes we like haven't completely isolated the cost for diapers. But yeah, you do spend a lot on diapers, so unless you potty train your children at like 6 months or 7 months, but some people do that, but like at least we haven't managed to do that. Baby activities, as I said, like if you take the baby swimming classes or singing classes or whatever, like that costs some money. We got a bicycle, and that's not necessarily a bicycle for him, but a bike where we basically like, and this is also a life hack we have done so far, is that I didn't want to have a child seat on my bike. My wife didn't want to have a child seat on her bike either. So what we did is that we bought a third bike and put a child seat there, and we just use whenever we need to take the kids somewhere, we use that bike. So that's what we did. Vaccines, so because we were traveling again before Corona, we had to vaccinate our child on top of the normal program with hepatitis and a lot of other stuff just in case. And that's, if you're not getting into the free vaccination program, that actually, as you see here, is quite expensive. And then my, let's say, black beast here is the taxis. So we have taken a few taxis, honestly, just to the hospital for, to give birth, and then also to a hospital again for some checks and so on. And those few taxi rides, even though it's like 10-15 minutes ride, it costs us already 2,500 Danish krona, but just to show that how insane the taxi prices are in Denmark, and I always use the opportunity to rant about how ridiculous that is. So yeah, that's the whole list that we have over here. Just 2 more notes here. The first one is that now as we're moving from the second to the third year from our son, we spend a lot more on toys and books. So this is something that's not really reflecting here, because again, toys are very cheap now. I mean, it's incredibly cheap. When I was growing up, it was not like that. So now they have a lot of really good quality toys and they're very cheap. And even though we could say we probably spend around the same amount of money on taxes and toys, and that's quite crazy. And also we got a lot of toys and books as gifts, so that's why maybe they don't show up here. But now we see that we're spending more money on like fancier toys and fancier books now in this year than in the last years. And the last one as well is that as one-off costs, and when we go here, I mean, we did have one-off costs, and as you can see, it's quite big. There's one major thing as well, is that we didn't need to move houses when we got our child. When we already had a house for now a few years, we had a separate bedroom that we could put him there, and we have enough space. But if you live, for example, in a 40 square meter flat and you're planning to have a child, you might consider moving away. You don't need to, and I know friends that have lived in a very small flat, especially for the first year. You really need a lot of space, but the moment your children start walking, it's more convenient, let's say, to have more space. And that can be another one-off cost that it's of course a lot more massive as a lifestyle change. But at least for us, we didn't change houses and we didn't change car, we didn't need to have a car and so on. So that means that again, like our one-off costs have kept on the low side. So to conclude, 100,000 krona over 2 years for the whole family. That's not too expensive if you ask me. So if you put the numbers into a bit of perspective, that's 50,000 krona per person over 2 years. Because we have two incomes in the family, would say, okay, that's 50,000 myself, 50,000 my wife. If you divide that per year, that's 25,000. And then if you reach to say, okay, how much it would cost me per person per month, that's around 2,000 krona per person per month for the first 2 years. That's not that bad, right? So it's not that a lot of people have this money lying around, but if you consider how much it costs, relatively speaking, to raise children in other countries, I would say that this is a cool deal. My quick take on this, and I'm paraphrasing Paul Graham, is that if you have your act together, this will not be a big change. Having children, at least financially speaking, will not be a big deal. If you have your structures in place, if you know your budgets, you have your cash flow in place, no worries, no problem. Now again, if you live paycheck to paycheck and you have no idea how much you spend, how much you earn, and you have never in your life been a budget, of course this could be a bit of a stressful situation. But at least with this video, hopefully you get a bit of perspective and know how much you should expect. Coming up next on my channel, I will soon make a video that explains the 2 apps I use to track my budgets and basically like make me have these numbers and this data that you can see here in this video in a very simple and low friction way. And that is Splitwise for the family costs and then Spendy for the personal costs. And both these apps are apps you can have on your phone, and the free version of these apps, which is the ones I use, it's super simple and works and it's perfect. Make sure you give subscribe below, because if you do that, you'll get notified when this video outlining these 2 apps comes into place. With that, I leave you with a video over here which continues giving you tips on how you can make the most of your life in Denmark by saving money. Thank you for making it all the way to the end, and all the best.